Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of Knowledge Finder EDU. Today we have a special guest, Christine, the founder of Insight Edu, which is a company that mentors children and helps them apply for the top universities in the country. Welcome, Christine. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine, thanks. I'm really happy to be here with you today, Ida.
Thank you for coming down. So we've invited you here today so you can share some insight on how people actually do go on about applying for the top universities. As we discussed, a lot of people may feel they can't apply to the top universities, even though they get good grades, they just feel it's out of their reach for whatever reason. So let's start firstly with your career journey and why you built Insight Edu.
Yeah, so my career journey is that I went to Kingston University. I studied business studies, and then following that, managed to get onto a graduate program with a company called Mercury Communications, and that was great. It gave me 2 years of training around the organisation in marketing, and then I stayed in telecoms for another 5-6 years. Changed field, still in marketing, but went into environmental marketing. And that was brilliant, especially as we're in this time now of climate change. And so to be right at the forefront of trying to convince people of the need to change their behaviours and take the environment seriously was an amazing, amazing journey. And about 4 years ago, I was head of marketing at a behaviour change consultancy, and I was actually then made redundant. And it was a real point at which I could decide what did I want to do with the rest of my career, like the next 20, 25 years of my career. And what I did want to do was work with young people. So I've been a governor of a primary school. I was chair of governors for 10 years. And so I have a real passion for helping young people and helping them succeed, and a real understanding that education can be completely life-changing for somebody. And it really is like a door to change your path and to access a whole new way of life. It was definitely the case with me. If I think about my background, having a degree has meant that I've been able to get into spaces and travel to countries and have jobs that I never would have been able to if I didn't have that educational foundation. So I decided that I wanted to do something for myself. And looking back at my own experience, I felt that it was really important to do something that represented my community and work for Black people. Because educationally, Black students have had such a rough ride at every stage. And notoriously, particularly from secondary school right through to degree, you start to see this constant pattern of under-fulfilling of our promise. And I felt really deeply that that was something that needed to be tackled head on and specifically. And my own experience of going to university is that I had the grades to go to whichever university I wanted to really. But when I went to different university campuses, when I looked around at who was there, I just remember thinking, I can't go to some of these places because there's nobody there that looks like me. There's just not another Black face there. Yeah. And where I come from, it's really diverse. And the thought of going to a space where I'd be such an other was completely overwhelming. And that really shaped which university I went to. And I've got children. And so when my daughter said virtually the same thing, that there was universities that she wanted to go to, she actually said that she wanted to go to Oxford or Cambridge, but she couldn't go because it wasn't for people like her. I was mortified, and I just thought, this needs to stop now. Yeah. Something fundamental needs to change to support these young people to know that they can go to these spaces. They belong in these spaces as much as anybody else. They just need some support to get there. So that was really the driving force behind me setting up with Insight Education.
Cool, I'm with you. So you mentioned two things there. You mentioned the challenge, there's a challenge with Black people in education system as a whole. What do you think is like the root cause of that problem?
The real root cause, I would say, is systematic and generational low expectations of Black students, which means that if they excel, then they're seen as the exception. And if they're not excelling, that it's it's okay, it's accepted, because, okay, they weren't ever going to do so well anyway.
Yeah.
And the number of students that I now speak to, and these are students that have gone off to brilliant universities, but somewhere along the line, they've had a teacher who basically said, it's not for you, you're not good enough. And that's what they're up against. They're up against people not believing in them enough.
Yeah.
And then maybe not having enough familial support or familial knowledge of the education system to be able to plug that gap. And when you put those two together, then you get a perfect storm of lots of people with talent and promise. They're just been letting down. So they do need some focus, support. And when you give that to them, they excel.
I agree. So what do you think of the current state of the education system in terms of its value and in terms of what you actually learn as a student in, for example, secondary school and before?
I love the range of subjects offered at secondary school, but I think that somewhere along the line, there's been a loss of creativity in the curriculum. And a bit of tick boxing in terms of what the children learn and how they learn. So I'm a big one for critical thinking. I think we should be teaching our children how to look at information and explore it for themselves on their own terms, how to write creatively from the heart. But instead, what I think I'm seeing is a lot more they have to learn about adverbial clauses, for example, in English. And that just sucks the life out, the joy of learning.
Yeah.
I think that there needs to be more done so that people leave with a real thirst for lifelong learning.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree. Lifelong learning is key. What would you say then if you've got one of your best students getting the best grades, could go to whatever uni they want to, but they don't see the value, so they want to be, I don't know, a YouTuber or something? What would you say?
I'd say your education is a brilliant foundation, and it's one that will stay with you forever. So go and get your education, because that gives you options way beyond a YouTuber career. A YouTuber career, a music career, any kind of alternative career, you can still go for that. But I think if you have a good education as your background, it gives you something to fall back on. And the other thing I would always say to somebody is, how many famous YouTubers do you know? The reality is that it's hard to make that kind of living. Whereas if you go to university and you go to a good university, get a good degree, the chances are you will then step into a professional career that will then give you further options. While you're thinking about those other options, you're going to be earning more than somebody who didn't go to university. And over your lifetime, if you're a male, even allowing for student loan, for example, or the extra tax you're going to pay because you're earning more, you'll earn £140,000 more over your lifetime than somebody who didn't go. So why would you turn your back on that opportunity to get such a solid base at the start of your life?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's definitely a great answer. So in general, anyway, we see a lot of different things on the news. What would you say is today's attitude in the young Black community from your perspective, in terms of like the students that you come across day to day? Are there many Black students excelling, or is it more as portrayed, I don't know, in the news, where we usually see like our bad side? We don't see positive images of all of the young kids that are doing great things. So from your standpoint, how do you see it?
I think that the stereotypes still prevalent in the news and on TV are really destructive, and they're not at all indicative of your average Black young person. So the people that I'm going to say have the privilege to support and work with, they're the complete opposite. They're hardworking, they're aspirational, they're ambitious for themselves, they're focused. And they're not the exception to the rule. They're the norm, I think.
Yeah.
And so it really is disheartening to see that the portrayal of young Black people is fast life, money grabbing, superficial in their thought, not at all community minded, because that is just not the case.
Oh, really? No, thank you. So when it comes to Black-owned business, then why would you say there's such a lack of Black-owned major corporations in the UK? Well, worldwide, really. Well, in the UK.
Yeah. So I was looking at a report earlier on this week, and it was talking about CEOs and black business. And it was saying that at the moment, the FTSE 100, there's not any black leaders of a FTSE 100 company in the UK. And that diversity right at the top of organisations has hardly shifted in the last 8 to 10 years. And I think that part of the problem is that to get to the top of any profession, you need to be supported to get there. I don't think that there's anybody that's really excelling at what they do and they've got there just completely off their own steam. It does take a village.
Yeah.
And so if you're not somebody who's had access to the allies, a champion, somebody who can advocate for you, somebody who can mentor and support you on the way up, chances are that you're not going to make it to the top. So that's why I think that we're not nurturing the talent through the organisations. In terms of black business is starting up, I think there's two problems. One is getting funding. It's a lot more difficult to get the funding if you're a black-owned business. And two is that we don't have that historical network of support as black business owners that we can call upon, either for our own community-based funding in the same way, or just to understand and get experience by learning through other people's mistakes about how to set up and run a business. So there isn't that community knowledge in quite the same way as there are in other communities.
Why do you think that is? Because there are successful black businesses in England and the US. So why don't we have that kind of community network?
I think that's a good question. I think that there isn't quite that same cohesion across the community, the black community, as you would say, for example, with an Asian community, where there's much more of a bind through religion, through their community events, through their familial networks. I think that black people, our families, tend to be much more nuclear, and deem ourselves to be self-sufficient. And actually, if we are going to grow as a people, we need to be reaching out and supporting each other on a larger scale than we currently do.
No, I agree. I definitely agree. Yeah, I recently went to an event called the Black Seed event in Brixton, which is a group of young investors that come together to basically put on an event where people can pitch and present their business ideas.
Yeah.
That was pretty good. So I'll definitely recommend that for anybody that's watching or looking for investment or ideas or just to meet like-minded people. What I was going to ask you next is more about the attitudes towards money. So you mentioned the black community with our families, we're more nuclear. So why would you say we don't speak about money that much within our own nuclear household, even though we are like so to ourselves? How comes money's not discussed and we don't speak about financial education or investments or anything like that? Really doesn't come up at the dinner table.
It doesn't, does it? It's really, really private. And if I think back to my own upbringing, we never spoke about our salaries. I never got an inkling as to what my parents were earning. All I knew is that we couldn't spend a lot because there wasn't a lot to go around. It was that kind of conversation. I think that's a really difficult one, actually. And I've never actually thought about the why. But the consequence of it is that you're right, that you then have young people growing up with reduced financial literacy, and a lack of discussion and education around things such as investment in properties or any other ventures available to them. And I can't help but think that part of it is that bravado and that pride that goes with money. And so we don't talk about it because we're a little bit either ashamed that we're not earning enough, or a bit also embarrassed if we think that we're earning too much, and you're scared of what people might think about you and how you'll be judged based on your income.
Yeah, or they might want some.
Yeah, I mean, that is the downside to it. But I think it is a real pity that we don't talk about money more openly across society in general, but definitely within black households, that we're not more upfront about just managing your money on a day-to-day basis, but also how can we grow our own money? How can we invest so that we aren't always reliant on somebody else? so that you have a regular income.
I definitely think that conversation is a necessary one, and I don't think it's had enough. I think within our community, we're very much taught get good grades, get a good job, and then like you're done there kind of thing. As long as you got a good job, a good like title or whatever, you made it. But for me, I found that weird because, like I say, I got the good grades and whatnot, but I was doing other business before entering like the real corporate world. So when I saw people that were literally earnings, for example, let's say 40K or whatever, and they would do this from the age of, I don't know, 25, 30, and do it until retirement, and maybe increase their salary by 10, 15K over that period. It was mind-blowing. I couldn't believe it was real. Like, it was like a Matrix moment for me. And then another thing that happened was when I got my first ever bonus. It was only 3K, and then I got taxed on it. And I was at a company, they sent me away on a course on the day, and I received a notification, and instead of 3K, I got like 18 or something, yeah. I was thinking, what's going on here? There must be some kind of error. So I left the course place, went outside, I phoned HR, and I was like, what's going on? It's supposed to be 3K. And they were like, yeah, you get taxed. I was like, what? Even on your bonus? I couldn't believe it, just because, like I say, no one told me about this stuff. So I didn't know. I thought they were wrong, like literally. So I actually got into it. I was like, nah, get your calculator out. This must be wrong, yeah? And then I like sat back for a minute and thought, hold on. So you mean to tell me everyone in this building is taking this same kind of tax? Like, I couldn't believe it. And then I thought, hold on a minute, this is everybody. This is like the whole, this is the world. Like, and that was me when I entered the working world properly. And then I just thought, nah, we have to have other things. Like, don't get me wrong, I think there's great benefits to working, but I think you should have some hobbies or do something else to have other skills rather than just one working skill. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I think also Black families are risk averse in a way that other communities aren't. And that's clearly because of our background and that need to feel that we've got something solid because the world's moving around us and taking things from us so much. But I think that then feeds through to the expectation given to our children, because my parents were exactly the same. Get a good education, get a good job, and then you're sorted for life. Yeah. And actually, the world doesn't work like that anymore.
Yeah, it's changed a lot.
It's changed a lot. There's no such thing as a job for life anymore. You've got to be prepared to be agile and move around and explore new opportunities. But that's not the case. So if I think of the students that come onto my A-level programme, we always ask them, what fields do you want to get into? And it's quite narrow, the types of jobs that they want to go into, but all of the jobs have in common that they're ones that once you're in, you can stay in that field forever. And there's literally always a really clear path from that degree into a job, when actually you should do a degree that you really love and then think more about, as you said, the transferable skills, because the future employer is going to want the transferable skills that you get, as opposed to just the specifics of the degree that you've done.
I'm with you. So how would somebody go about applying to a top university then? Say they've got the good grades, they're on track. Yeah. What separates them from somebody else that's applying? Yeah.
I would say if you're wanting to apply to a top university, first you definitely need to get those good grades. So those are the kinds of decisions that you need to start thinking about right from GCSE stage. You also need to think about what else on paper makes you an attractive student, because you'll be up against other people with also really great grades. So what other volunteering work that you can do to talk about you as a more rounded person? What extra reading have you done to show how much you love your subject? Because these top universities, they want students that are really inquisitive about the subject. They really want to delve into it. They want to dive into it and live the subject. Yeah. So you need to be able to evidence that. And it's not enough to talk about what you've done. They want to know about what you think. So yeah, you might have read an extra book or gone to an extra lecture, and that's great. But what thoughts did they spark? And what ideas did they generate? What perspective did they give you that you didn't have before? Those are the types of things that these top universities are looking for. So I would say start building out think of it as a CV. So grades are your baseline, but you've also got to then think about, how can I prove that I love my subject? How can I prove that I've got other skills I want, like time management? They'll want somebody who's great at communicating, for example. They'll want somebody who's trustworthy. Those are other things that you need to be able to demonstrate through voluntary work, through extra work at school, through joining clubs where you can build up skills, like debating clubs, those kind of things.
So that's the main thing to separate you. Basically, extracurricular activities and work experience.
Yeah, and really, rather than extra, what we call supercurricular activities. So those are the extra reading, the going to the lectures, trying to get onto summer schools, just so that you can show that you've gone over and above just what you've learned in the classroom, because you so like your subject that you really want to find out more about it.
Okay, thank you. Some great advice. So there you go then. If you do want to apply to one of the top universities, you've got a little formula that might help you with your application. And how does Insight actually help students? So if there's students that want to get involved, how do they do that? And how do you help them apply?
Yeah, so with Insight, what we do is we work with students age 14 to 18 as our mentees, and then we run 2 educational-based programs with them. And in each case, then we match them to a Black Heritage mentor from a leading university. So at the moment, for this year, for example, we're working with University of East Anglia, Imperial, Durham and Manchester. And in each case, they're put on a program where they're helped to decide what they want to do, to get an idea of what type of university they want to get to. For our GCSE programme, then we help them with their study skills. We help them to really think about how to be that type of student that university is looking for. And with our A-level programme, we run monthly mentoring programmes where they meet with their mentor every month online, and then they're walked through the application process. So we help them think about what type of degree they want to do, what type of university they want to go to. Is it a campus one, a city one? Do they want to stay at home? How to understand things such as student finance, what life at university is like. And then again, we help them with tutorials. But the real thing that we support them with is that knowledge of how to apply. So writing their personal statements, building out themselves as a student, as I was just talking about, and then getting them ready so that when they're applying, they're doing it confidently.
Thank you very much. And how do they get involved? So if they want to sign up, how do they?
Yeah, so if any mentors want to sign up, then the best thing to do is just go to our website and fill in one of our contact forms. And that means that you'll go on our waiting list. The other thing is pitch it to your universities. We work with universities, so definitely we'll be always on the lookout for even more university partners to work with. And similarly for mentees, if you're a mentee and you want to be involved, we do open our applications for our A-level programme in the autumn. So look out for us on social media, but you can always come to our website and fill in the contact form and you'll join our waiting list.
Okay then. So if you share that with them, your website, your social media links.
Yeah, so the website is with insightedu.org and our Twitter link is at with Insight Edu.
Well, there you have it, guys. A couple gems for you to apply to uni. If you do think it's a great idea and you would like your uni to onboard, feel free to contact Christine. The details will be in the links below. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and we'll see you next week.